everyone, it's Katey, and this is going to be a fun video. I hope it doesn't come across as a flex, but I thought it would be a bit of fun. And that is, I wanted to share with you about 5 or 6 decks that are the most valuable decks in my collection. Now, I'm not using that valuable in like the nice emotional way of my great grandmother gave me the deck, so it's special. I'm talking about cash money value. Now, I will also say that value changes, like the market changes. Decks come back into print, like the Gaian Tarot a couple of years ago was going for $200–300. Not anymore. You can get it, you know, in your local bookshop for $20 or $30. Other decks that now might not be worth much do go out of print and then become more valuable. Things change. But as far as I'm currently aware, these are the decks in my collection that would fetch a higher price tag. Let's put it that way. Let's start with the obvious, the Liminal Tarot. Now this, I think, probably has reduced in value slightly since the creator has made available a slightly different edition. But a couple of years ago, this baby fetched big bucks, and I think it's still fairly valuable. This was the original edition, limited to 200. I have 111, which I love. This tin is just great, and then the cards are big and juicy. Now, I'm not going to be telling you like exactly what I think these decks are worth because the market fluctuates so much, but this is kind of one of those more collector decks that I have. And oh, it smells good. This is one of my favorite 6 of coins out of any deck ever. I love it. Actually, it's a deck I haven't used a lot in a little while, and like pulling it out right now is making me really want to use it. It's just beautiful. And actually it has quite a springtime vibe, which is perfect for right now, in the Southern Hemisphere at least. But this deck, the quality of it is just top notch. The cards are big and gorgeous, like they're thick without being like too thick. They're just really sturdy. The image like quality and the color reproduction's just stunning. That kind of like tin box is amazing. It's limited edition, as I said. It's just a really beautifully made deck, as well as just being an incredibly special combination of art, or like collection of artwork as well. This was the first deck that I kind of really saved up for and spent money on. I did buy it while it was still available from the artist, so I didn't pay like peak, you know, market value. I paid what the artist was asking for, but that was still like a chunk of money, especially with international shipping. So it was kind of my first big splash in the tarot world, and I never regretted it. I got so much use out of this deck, and it's just gorgeous. It's very Rider-Waite-Smith in terms of the way, like the interpretations and the way that the cards have been depicted, but the artwork itself has been inspired by Lady Frida Harris, who did the Thoth deck. Kind of like those really beautiful lines and the movement and the colors. That's quite reminiscent of the Thoth in a lot of ways. I mean, it's very different. It's Penelope's own style, but I love that because I've always loved the look of the Thoth deck, just not really loved the Thoth deck. So yeah, this is a special deck. It's a really special deck. And then also special in the sense that it really is one of a kind, or 1 of 200, which is pretty special. The next is another deck in a tin, and it is the Minute deck. This is such a fun deck. It's one of my favorites. I managed to score, I think, the last copy that was available from the artist. And it's just this mini deck. And the creator gave herself a time limit of 5 minutes to draw and like complete each and every card. Which is, I think it's such a fun and playful approach to the cards. Originally, she kind of set out this challenge for herself to get over her, you know, artist block while she's creating another deck. I'm not really interested in those other decks. It's that kind of really snappy, playful energy that I like so much about this deck. It's just really cool. I love the colors. I love that it's just a Rider-Waite-Smith clone, but this rushed kind of really simplistic artwork. It's like she was kind of forced to pick out the symbols that mattered most to her in that moment to depict the image, if that makes sense. So it's got an immediacy to it that's really fun, I think. And it's just, I love the size of it. I love everything about it. It's a really fun deck, but it has been out of print for a while. She's done a couple of different printings, but I'm not sure if she's planning on doing another. But this is one of my favorite go-to decks. So I'm really happy that I managed to score the last copy. And in fact, the creator was really fun and generous when I emailed her, and she said she had one more to send me. She also sent me a little pendant that she'd created with a dog face on it. It's so cute. And it did also come with this little pouch, which is what I keep it in. So it did come with the tin, which I've kept, but I don't keep the deck in. I keep it in this cute little pouch, which is hand painted. So pretty. The next deck, I think, is probably, I don't know. I know it's valuable, but I've trimmed and modified mine quite a lot. So I've definitely like halved the value of this deck, but I wanted to share it with you anyway because it's such a wonderful one. It is the Stella's Tarot. As I said, I've modified it, which drastically decreases its value, but the deck itself is still a very sought after one. And even though I've modified it, I've done a damn good job. So I still get people asking quite regularly. Pretty much every time I show this deck, I'll get an email being like, if you ever decide to move it on. I'm like, no fam. I don't see that happening anytime soon. So the Stella's Tarot, it's created by a Japanese artist, Stella, who is on Instagram. And this deck was published by, was it AGM? It was AGM. But it's been out of print for quite a while now. And I don't think it was in print for very long, so there's not a huge amount of decks circulating. But I love it. I bought it on Book Depository when it was still available. See, I think that's the thing. Some people think that I've just spent hundreds of dollars on these decks. A lot of them I got when they were still available. Not all of them. A lot of them I got in trades, you know. So there's lots of different ways to get pricey decks. Not all of them involve bidding wars on eBay, let's put it that way. But this is a gorgeous little deck, and I love that I trimmed it. At first I regretted it, but now that I have it trimmed, I love it. I love that it's this little pocket-sized deck. I didn't particularly dislike the borders, to be perfectly honest, even though they are quite big. I didn't hate them, but I do love it trimmed. It's still a very special deck to me. Next is a deck that I think has decreased in value a little, although not that much. And it's the only one that I haven't used yet. It's the Gaian Tarot. I managed to get this one for a steal, really. And it has come back into print. It was reprinted by Schiffer. But it was out of print for a while, and the edition that I have is the Llewellyn printing, which I think pretty much everyone can agree is superior to the current Schiffer publishing. Schiffer put the cards on their horrible cardstock and put big ass blue borders on it, which is just unnecessary. Schiffer, why? But this is a deck that has been much beloved for a long time, and the people who love it, love it. So a lot of the time people choose to kind of seek out this deck, even though you can get the Schiffer deck. I even know several people who've gotten the Schiffer deck, fallen in love with it, so much so that they want this one. So this is a deck that I don't think is worth as much now because the Schiffer one is available, but it's still definitely a highly sought after edition. And I can definitely understand why, because I knew I wanted this deck, but I didn't want to get the Schiffer version. I wanted this version, and I just hung out until I managed to get a really good price. But I have seen this deck go for a couple of $100. And to be honest, if somebody's really keen on this deck, I don't blame them for investing in, you know, the quality that this one provides, if they know they're really going to get a lot of use out of it, and if the deck's really special to them. So mine is still brand new pretty much. Like I've opened it up obviously, but I have not used it, and I need to. It's definitely a goal of mine, is to just get into this deck. The next deck is the Idiosyncradeck Tarot. This was sent to me as a gift, and I still can't quite believe that. Thank you, Tracy. You made my fucking year with this one. This is such a cool deck. This is another deck that every time I show it, I get messages or comments being like, if you're selling it, are you selling it? Can I buy it? Because I don't think there was a lot of decks printed. I think it was one of those decks that kind of flew under the radar while it was out. And then once it went out of print and became harder to find, the people who wanted it really wanted it. And so people tend to be willing to kind of fork out quite a bit for it, as far as I've seen. I'm not looking to move mine on anytime soon, so don't be asking me. But I can certainly appreciate why people value this deck so highly. And I mean, part of it's because it's not readily available, but part of it's because it's so effective, I think. It's so gorgeous, it's so simple, and yet all of the messages just come across in an instant. You look at the card and immediately, even if you don't know the exact meaning behind, you know, the Rider-Waite-Smith technical meanings, you get the sense, you get the feeling. And I think there's something so special about a deck that can just do that so immediately with you. It tugs at those heartstrings and like those memories, and it just pulls all of that out of me in a really fun way. So I love the simplicity of it. I just think it's a wonderful deck. It reads beautifully for me and I just adore it. Oh, I'm so lucky to have it. It's one that I had kind of had my eye on for a long time, but it just doesn't come up for sale very often. And so to get it as a gift was just something really, really special. Thank you, Tracy. And we have the fantastic Menagerie. This was the first deck that I got that I really kind of knew was worth money. I mean, all Bubba Studios decks tend to kind of appreciate quite well once they go out of print. Bubba Studios tends to do quite limited runs. Although to be fair, they often do reprint decks. So I personally wouldn't really be one to spend big on a Bubba Studios deck just because you never know when they're going to bring it out again. But having said that, Bubba Studios decks in general, like even when you purchase from Bubba Studios, they're pricey decks and they're wonderful quality, and you know, the craftsmanship that goes into them is top notch. So there's reason behind those prices. But this was one of their first decks. It was very early on in their deck creating careers. And it's been unavailable for a long, long time. And basically I had a big list of decks I was trading on a Facebook page, on an Australian Facebook page, and a lady had 2 copies of this. And she said, like, I think it was 8 decks I sent her. Some that were out of print, some that were kind of worth a decent amount of money, but that I just wasn't using. So I sent her 8 decks, or maybe it was 6, but it was a lot of decks for this one. And to be perfectly honest, I wasn't really looking for this deck. I didn't really think, I wasn't sure if it was going to be one I liked, basically. It didn't call out as like, oh my god, that deck is so me. It was actually really quite out of my comfort zone, especially at the time when I was still kind of learning tarot. And these images, although it's based on the Rider-Waite-Smith as far as the meanings are concerned, they don't really look Rider-Waite-Smithy at all. So it was really out of my comfort zone, but I also I was aware enough to know that this sort of deal wouldn't come up again. And in fact, I've never seen this deck available any other time like that I've seen. I'm sure it has been, people have been selling it and trading it, but I've never seen it come up again. So I was very lucky with that. And so I jumped on it. And actually when it arrived, it was still sealed. And I did an unboxing. I'll link it below because there's some, what do you call it, suspense. Some proper suspense in that. Because I opened it up and realized that there was a card missing. There was like a double of one card, but then that meant that there was a card missing. I forget which it was. Was it a Major Arcana or a Swords card? I don't remember. Which would effectively make this deck like worthless and unusable, really. Which was pretty sad and whatever. But I contacted the lady. Like, I knew it wasn't her fault. She'd given me a sealed copy. But I also knew I couldn't really contact Bubba Studios because they'd been out of print for 10 years. I couldn't expect them to have kept spare cards. I don't know how or why, but she had spare cards of this deck. And so she was able to send me the replacement card and I sent her the double. So I was so lucky to get this deck, and then I was so lucky that I was able to rectify that error and get a full proper deck. It's just kind of, I'm very lucky when it comes to this deck. And I was so surprised at how much fun I had reading with this deck. How I was reading with it. I wasn't sure that I was at a place yet where I could. And I did, and I fell in love. And this deck, you'll see, if you've been watching me for any length of time, this deck consistently shows up in my top 5 favorites, in my most used decks. Like, it's just a go-to favorite deck for me. So I'm very lucky in that sense. And this is another one that I get asked, if you're selling, can I buy it? I'm not selling. Even if I was offered big money, to me, it's just not worth it. I love this deck. I mean, if somebody was going to buy me a house or something, it's just a deck of cards, I'll give you. But like, there's just no reasonable sum of money that would make it worth it for me. If you've been following me for a while, you will notice that there are quite a few of the more expensive collectible decks that I have had in the past that aren't part of my collection anymore. Decks like that would include like the Blushing Fool. I've had a Blushing Fool blue box before. Decks like, I don't know, like I've had the Tarot of the Crone. I've had the Royal Fez Moroccan, although to be fair, mine was a little bit worn. I've had like the Linda Famira, I can't remember how you pronounce that, but that was the sort of deck that was so rare that it was hard to get a value on, because it was like a limited edition in a magazine in Germany one time in like the 80s, like really niche and unique, to the point where it's one of those things that it could be worth a lot or nothing, and you can't really tell because there's not a market for it because it's that rare. So I've had some really unique and collectible and valuable decks over the years, but these are really the only ones left that I have at the moment. I think the Circo Tarot might be going out of print, so that might end up on this list too. But decks like Kitty Kahane, Tarot of the Crone, I know those have been worth quite a bit of money, but at the end of the day, it might sometimes feel nice to have decks that are valuable, but ultimately I want decks that I love and that I use, and so I don't keep decks just because they're valuable. So I hope this video comes across as like a fun sharing type video, not like a weird flex but okay video. I do think it's fun to talk about the decks that we have in different ways, and I do have some pretty special decks, and that I'm just really happy and grateful that they're part of my life. Because aside from the Gaian Tarot, I've spent an awful lot of time with these other decks, and I love them. They all read so well, and they just kind of click and work for me. So regardless of their market value, they're really special to me and have a wonderful place in my collection. As always, a big thank you to my wonderful patrons over on Patreon. You guys make what I do here on YouTube a lot easier. I have a lot more time to devote to YouTube. You're essentially sponsoring these videos, so everybody should be thanking you if they're enjoying my videos. I really appreciate your support. A big extra special thank you to the stars, Tracy Timmerman, Lynette Brown, and Laurie. You guys are fab. If you like my videos and you like what I do here on YouTube and you'd like to support me, you can do so over on my Patreon. It's a sliding scale starting from $1, and we have some cool stuff over there, so I'll leave a link in the description below if you're interested. So I do hope you've enjoyed walking through kind of the more valuable decks in my collection. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave those below, and I'll talk to you again next time. So much love. Bye.